The next slide is kind of a parental advisory, right? Parental advisory. We're going to talk about some things now that are, there's going to be some explicit content. If your children are in the room, probably not a good idea to share this with kids that are underage, because we're going to talk about some of the difficult subject now here about passing through, all right? We're going to talk a little bit about that. Not a lot, but we're going to talk a little bit about it. Okay. Next slide. Passing through to Molech. For fallen angels are in the earth in those days and also after that. Okay. Were there watchers after that? Moshe says, yes, there were, and that they gathered after that. How did they do this? It is sexual sin. All right? If you go and you read the chapter, Vayikra, or Leviticus, chapter 18, you're going to see verse after verse after verse after verse about sexual sin. You shall not uncover the nakedness of your mother-in-law or your grandmother or your sister or your brother or your brother-in-law. It goes on and it has a list of close relatives that you're not supposed to be in a relationship with at all, okay? Some of those, to give you an example, you're not supposed to take your sister as your wife. Well, Abraham took his half-sister as his wife. You're not supposed to take a woman and her sister as your wives. Well, Yaakov did exactly that. He took Leah and Rachel as his wives, right? All of this is set forth in the Torah saying that is a prohibited relationship. You're not supposed to do it. And so you're looking at all of this sexual sin. Boom, boom, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this. And then here, when we get to verse 20, moreover, you shall not lie carnally with your neighbor's woman to defile yourself with her. Okay, sexual sin, right? Verse 21, and you shall not let any of your seed pass through the fire, which doesn't really appear there in the Hebrew, to Molech. Neither shall you profane at the name of your Elohiym. I am Yahweh. All right, now look at this. Here's all these sexual sins, and then boom, by the way, don't pass your seed through to Molech. What are they talking about? What are they talking about? What's he talking about here to Molech? He's talking about the idea of relations, sexual relations with fallen watchers. Now, I did a discussion on this. Again, you can find this on my blogs. If you type in Molech in the search engine, you'll see that when we talk about Molech, Melech, Malach, right? Those words have distinct different meanings in the Hebrew, but those words are spelled the same. Mem, Lamed, Kof, or Kof Safi. So what you see is Molech, Malach, Melech. Melech is king. Malach, angel. Molech. Who's Molech? What's he doing there? Fallen angel. Fallen angel. Molech, fallen angel. Okay? Also called Milcom, but Milcom is arguably a plural word. Malachim or Molechim. Now, let's look at this. We saw Moleket, queen of heaven. Now we have Molechim, which is in Scripture is Malcolm. Molechim, Moleket, or Molekot. What's this tell you? These watchers were appearing as men and women. In fact, I argue that these watchers were primarily female after the flood. Why? Because, of course, the Scripture says that the seed of the woman shall crush the head of the serpent. So if the seed of the woman is going to crush the head of the serpent, then maybe we need to appear as women rather than men. Now, while we're talking about this, were you ever a big dinosaur guy when you were a kid? So I know a lot of people are enthusiastic about this, of course, because there is a fossil record, skeletons having been found for some of these creatures. All right. So one of the guys in CPG who was in Australia, he was down there and he was looking around and they came upon a crocodile. And he said, the Book of Giants describes that these fallen watchers not only had relations with human women, but also had relations with animals. Now, I want you to think about this for a minute. If these watchers were giants, – 30 to 60 feet tall or taller, And they had relations with the crocodile to breed a hybrid. Think about what the Tyrannosaurus Rex looks like if it's not a hybrid cross between a giant human being and a crocodile. You have to remember there are species on Earth like the alligator and also like the sturgeon and other species that they don't stop growing. You know, a human being stops growing. You hit a certain age, you're done growing. You know, well, at least you're done growing tall. A lot of guys grow this way, but they stop growing this way, right? But with alligators, they don't. They just keep right on growing and growing. Somebody found a 22-footer just recently. It was hanging, I forget, it was in Alabama or Georgia somewhere. Massive, huge gator. Why? Because they keep growing. Now, think about what life was like before death came into the world, and think about what life was like before the flood. You have testimony that Methuselah lived in, the 980 years. Adam lived to 930 years. You had all these people living to 600, 700, 800, 900 years. Didn't the species who didn't stop growing also live that long? They probably did. And so this antediluvian history shows that these animals who were not just a little bit old, but 200, 300, 400, 500, 600, 800 years old, kept on growing and growing and growing and growing and growing. There was nothing to stop their growth. And so they became huge and massive animals, right? The Bible calls them, behemoth, right? Behemoth and Leviathan. And so you have these massive creatures on the earth that were natural creations. But the T-Rex is something that interrupts the paleo record. All the guys who study paleontology will tell you the T-Rex appears out of nowhere and interrupts the record. Of course, they want to date it back 10,000 or 100,000 years or however long they want to take it back there. But you have this record. I submit to you that is consistent with this fall of the Watchers and their creation of hybrids. All right. Let's continue because I want to talk about this hybrid issue a little bit. There was stuff at the Fukushima tsunami that washed stuff ashore in Japan that people had never seen before. What is that ugly looking thing that's just come ashore? They saw things they'd never seen before. And because they had come up from depths where people don't fish, right? And we don't know what's down there at 10,000, 8,000 feet. We don't know what's down there. Something that can resist that kind of water pressure. We don't know. I mean, I love Amos. I love the minor prophets. They're so fantastic. Hosea is just a wealth of knowledge, as is Habakkuk. And, of course, Obadiah. I mean, the stuff is just a wealth of knowledge. Tremendous, tremendous prophecy. But while we're talking about Hosea, let's take a look at this verse, again, reiterating the fact that passing through the fire was sexual sin, right? So my people ask counsel at their trees. Now, these are tree worshipers, the tree huggers. And their staff declares unto them, for the ruach of whoredoms has caused them to err. So here we're talking very specifically about the Druid worship of the tree, that this is considered whoredom, and that they have gone a-whoring from under their Elohiym. They sacrifice upon the tops of the mountains and burn incense upon the hills. Now, this term burn incense, which is Qatar, like Qatar, the country, it's not burn incense, it's burn a sacrifice, right? They burn sacrifices under the hills and oaks and the poplars and the elms because the shadow thereof is good. Therefore, your daughter shall commit whoredom. Now, when they're talking about that, give a sacrifice, burn a sacrifice, doing it under trees. You see, this is sexual sin that's going on. They're doing it under trees because the shadow is good. They're not doing that to protect the fire. They're doing that because something else is going on. And therefore, your daughters shall commit whoredom, and your bride shall break wedlock. It's very specific here. Your bride shall break wedlock. In a lot of texts, it says your bride shall commit adultery. Okay, commit adultery, break wedlock, commit whoredom. What's going on here? It's sexual sin that's going on here. I will not punish your daughters when they commit whoredom, nor your brides when they break wedlock, for they separated themselves with whoredom, and they sacrificed with harlots. Therefore, the people that do not understand shall fall. What he's saying here is that I'm not going to punish you. You're punishing yourself. You're going to create things from which you will never escape. But the Bafomet is at play here. Remember that the Bafomet is this half human being, half goat, right? He's got goat feet. He's got a goat head, but he's half male and half female human being. And this is a Luciferian worshiper who is usually shown with the pentagram on his stomach or her stomach, depending on how you put it. But it is a multi-gendered, multi-species being. And this being is what has been worshipped by the Luciferians in the Rosicrucian order and in the Knights Templar and their subsidiaries, their heirs and successors, including the Jesuit order, including the Illuminati, who have engaged in this kind of worship. In fact, if you go back, anybody can watch it if they want, if they have the stomach for it. Again, this portion of the show is for adults. But there is a video, a complete video of the opening of this huge tunnel in Switzerland. And it's the biggest tunnel ever built in Switzerland, and the Swiss were extremely proud of this tunnel. So they put on this ritual. Now, bear in mind that Switzerland was formed by the refugees of the Knights Templar that had escaped the persecution of Henry of Navarre. And so they put on this huge festival. Let's have a huge festival opening up this tunnel. You know, some of the things that were happening in the tunnel looked like they had train loads of believers in carts that they were hauling off to the death camps. And then this thing about the Bafomet and the harpies, what's actually going on there is that you have this Bafomet dancing with his harpies, and then you have a bunch of people that are out there in white linen. These are the people expecting the rapture, okay? And this was the concept of what was going on here. These people were expecting the rapture, and then you see these people in the back there being taken up. They're being taken up on this, fence-like thing in the back, like they're being lifted up into the rapture. And as the bride is about to be raptured from this stage, the Baphomet goat head comes out and seduces the bride. Like at the last minute, this Baphomet is going to have the success of converting all of mankind by seducing the bride at the moment of the rapture. Now, this is what was presented in that video, what's presented at that rite. But what you see here, what's critically important about it, is the Baphomet, okay? The Baphomet. Now, on this blog that I talk about that's on the Sefer website, if you go to the Sefer website, look up the blog on Nephilim, you're going to see that there is this discussion of the DNA and what took place. Now, what happens is this. You have this idea that, well, in the mitochondrial DNA is typically the DNA exclusively of the mother, but not always. Sometimes the mitochondrial DNA has the mother's DNA and the mother of the father's DNA in the mitochondrial DNA. And there's a third form of mitochondrial DNA that has some weird aspect to it that they think it's some kind of bacteriological factor in the mitochondrial DNA. All right. But they know this, that it's possible to take a woman who is not the mother of the child and take a fertilized egg, the fertilized ovum, and place it inside the mother so that she becomes the donor, and her DNA wraps over the male and female DNA that are present in the seed that has been implanted in the donor. Now, I think this is how they get much of their children, and that they have this conspicuous additional DNA that creates a different bloodline and creates this condition that they become the seed of the serpent. They become the seed of the serpent. So when Mashiach is arguing and he's saying, look, you are, Abraham was your father, but you are the sons of vipers. You are the children of vipers. What's he talking about there? He's talking about the fact that their natural DNA was of Abraham, but they have been picked up in the donor bodies of this darkened DNA.